everybody, it's me, the Kadoozie. We're back with another episode. And now I'm in Boston. I'm back in Boston again. Well, I'm in Hingham with the one and only, my dad. Okay, so I'm so excited to talk to my dad on the microphone about his illustrious career. We're going to talk about well, first of all, say hi, Dad.
Hello there, everybody. Hi, Sue.
He's the Papa Kadoozie, that right there. So, my dad's been in labor mediation and involved in the unions his whole entire adult life. And I still, as a person, don't completely understand all of it. And because so much is going on now, I always try to ask him about what's going on. Because I don't know if, the regular people get it completely either. So, whatever. So, we're going to talk about that. But first, we're going to start off when you first started off getting involved in the union, because I love the idea of what motivates people and how it all goes. So what really got you into the unions?
Well, when I was 19 years old, I got a job as an apprentice carpenter. And after 2 months, I was initiated into Carpenters Local 33 in Boston. I attended the meeting. At the time, a part of the initiation where they would have a committee come out, interview you, go back and report to the body whether you were capable or honorable enough to become a member of the Carpenters Union. Upon their recommendation, the body would vote and you would be invited into the meeting and take an oath of office. And I did all of those things. The one thing that kind of knocked me out on it, there was about 35 members in the union hall, plus the president and other officers. And the hall was divided like many halls, right down the middle. There was 33 members sitting on one side of the hall and 2 members on the other side of the hall. And I said to myself, it looks a little peculiar. I'm going to be interested to see why this happened. So that was kind of the beginning of my interest in unions, because it was clearly there was a divide among the membership. Okay,
so we got to go back a little bit, because this is something you understand, but I want everybody and I want to understand. Okay, so an apprentice means what?
Green, no experience, first year apprentice, no experience as a carpenter.
Okay, so what motivated you to want to be a carpenter? Anything, or you just?
Well, I was always interested in the trades and construction, the building. It was a good job. When you got through your apprenticeship, you made it a livable wage, and it had a future. It was as I went through my apprenticeship and got into the trade, it became more and more valuable to me, because you become part of the structure you're building, and my career was mainly building construction. So you walk by a building, I walk by a building now, and it had my imprint on it. I worked on that building, or I was a foreman on that building. It really was part of me in the building, and it's tangible. It was something you actually see and feel and touch.
Well, it's funny, because as you were talking, I was thinking there's an artistry to carpentry too, right?
No question about that. That's former Senate President Billy Bulger would refer to the trades as artisans, because that's what they were described at, as it evolved over centuries.
Well, I feel like de Kooning, who's a famous painter, he was a carpenter as well. He would make his apartment very clean and sparse, but he would build benches and make it nice and clean. And so that was what he did originally. He was a carpenter as well. And Jesus, of course, was a carpenter, right? But wait a minute. Okay, so there's an artistry to it. And also the architecture, the idea of the building too. I never got that in terms of art, but if you think about when you look at a building, you want it to be nice if you're going to look at it forever. That's right. There really are things like eyesores that are just... Okay, so all right, so you're an apprentice. So then they what was it called when they brought you when they came in to find out if you could be in the union?
Oh, an interview.
They did an interview. How many people came to the interview?
As I remember, it was a long time ago, Sue.
I know, but as much as you can.
It was 3 or 4.
As much as you can.
And they were members. They were picked. They weren't officers. They were just members that attended the meeting.
And they did a moral.
Not a moral. Just to see, if they thought that I had the caliber to become a carpenter. It was kind of it was somewhat of a routine. It wasn't. It has years ago in medieval times there would be apprentice would be indentured to a master craftsman, and that master craftsman would be responsible for teaching the apprentice the trade. Also, not only teaching the trade, but responsible for his welfare, providing a home, food, clothing, and when the apprentice finished his apprenticeship, he would become a journeyman and go to work for the master mechanic.
But then he would get paid and he wouldn't be taken care of anymore, right?
Right.
That's funny because that is like the art. Because I was reading the book about Da Vinci, and that's how he started. He worked with a master artist, and that's what they would do, and they would teach him every. There's like a purity to it. Is that what you would take into?
Absolutely. I mean, there's it's deep rooted. I mean, there's history in it. There's many things in those times. Of course, in those times there was no labor movement. In those times, there was customs, how you behaved, how an owner of the property would build a castle, and the customs were, for example, if something happened that you couldn't continue the job, custom were you would pay the master mechanic to do wages for him and his workers, and that was a custom. Today we look at it as part of the collective bargaining agreement.
Right, which we have to get into because it all confuses me so much. So it started off as very dignified and very honorable and
someone might say it's still that way.
Yes, well, that's what I want to understand, because my view of it isn't always that. As a layperson, I don't completely understand it. So I'm trying to find out. Like, I love to find out what motivates people to. So there was the art of it, the fact that you could get a good job. And now tell me, so you went into the meeting, and so there were a whole 30 on one side and 2 on the other. Meaning, what did that mean? They were divided.
Well, as I learned through the years that the 33 on one side were supporters of the leadership of the union. The 2 on the other side were vocal opposition, but clearly the minority.
But they still had a voice.
They still had a voice, absolutely.
They were still allowed to oppose.
That's right.
And so I want to get into like how much of that is allowed, really, and all that.
Well, I'll tell you the story. I tell people all the time, and I call it my evolution in the labor movement, in particular in my local union. Just because we grew up in an urban area in Savin Hill, you always carried a little bit of an edge when you're a young person. So when I began my career in the union, I refer to it as I began down the left corner of the union hall. And people ask me, what's the left corner of the union hall? Well, I said that was the left corner of the union hall that I would, no matter what would happen, I would be with a group of people. Whatever leadership proposed, I would always challenge them on their proposal and give them somewhat of a bad time. Then the other part of the union hall, there was I called it the right front corner. That was I refer to it as the Amen corner. What they did, the Amen corner, whatever the leadership presented, they would say, "Amen, brother. Amen. You got our vote. Amen, brother." And consequently, there was, needless to say, there's more people at the right front corner than there in the left rear corner. Well, after a number of years, I realized that in the left rear corner, I was very fortunate. My entire career as a carpenter, I worked a lot. I didn't lose a lot of time. But those jobs I had, I was hanging off the side of the buildings. I was always outside in the winter, hot in the summer, cold in the winter. Very hard work. The Amen corner, for some reason, were able to get the inside jobs in the winter with the white clean overalls, and not only that, the jobs would more than likely end up in overtime. So I said to myself, well, maybe I better adjust a little bit, see if I can find some common ground. The truth of the matter is, most union members are in between the right front and the left rear. Mm-hmm. They want to do is they want to work make a living, provide for that family, and just do okay. The union is run by whoever runs the union, and that's kind of where it came from. So I somewhat gravitated. Now, if you ask me now if I'm, what kind of my philosophy, I tell people all the time, being a trade unionist, I'm an unapologetic liberal. A trade unionist at heart. I'm trade unionist by philosophy, trade unionist by politics. But
which means that you're totally for the union.
Well, yes, but
okay.
But I always put a qualifier on it now. With the bumps and bruises and scratches I've had during my career, I'm a practical liberal. I'm a practical trade unionist. The days of radical behavior in the union doesn't work anymore. Radical behavior is... the first day I was on the job, there was 123 bricklayers. It was... I began my career working nights, and then in the summertime I got on the day shift. But the bricklayers were going back to work after lunch. 120 bricklayers climbing up staging. I'm working down at the mill. That they had me beside the millman. He was highly skilled carpenter, so they put apprentices with him so they could learn.
Okay.
All of a sudden, it's we went back to work from lunch at 12:30. It's between 1:15 and 10:01. All of a sudden, I see all the bricklayers, they're coming down. I said to myself, what's going on? So I asked the millman what they were doing. He said, I don't know. Found out seems as though when they came back from lunch, there was no ice in the water. So they walked off the job.
Ice in what water?
The drinking water they had on the staging.
Oh, they wanted ice?
They wanted ice. So they walked off the job. They not only all the bricklayers, all the bricklayer foreman and the bricklayer superintendent, they all left the job. But the difference from today and then was that they all went back to Dorchester, South Boston, Somerville, Medford, Rosendale, West Roxbury. They all went back to an urban area. They lived beside one another. They came from the same community. So one left, they all left. You fast forward to today, that's all. Today it's based on the standard of living we have. We have a very high standard of living. So week to week, the paycheck coming in, you can't afford to lose a day's pay because there are so many responsibilities on.
Why could they before? Because it's not as expensive. Everything's much more expensive now, or
it's the standard of living's higher. I mean, you take a look. I mean, we grew up in Savin Hill, in a two-family house. We had rent coming in from people. People lived in three families. There was a black and white TV, maybe one car. Now it's 5 color television sets, 3 cars, the internet, all the bells and whistles you have with the modern day, and that's a good thing. I mean, that's just a good thing. That's our standard of living is pretty good. And by the way, we want all kids to go to colleges. We want them to go. Not only want them to go to college, we want them to go to the best college.
But it is interesting, the pressure of society nowadays in terms of, we started off talking about the purity of the craft, and now it's not as, it's because everything's so fast nowadays.
Well, it is. It is. Well, dear friend of mine, Paul Roach, he describes it. He said that our parents were of the greatest generation. They lived through the Depression, fought the Second World War, came back, went to school on the GI Bill, established this country, made this country great. He refers to our generation, and I agree with him. He said, we're the luckiest generation because we were too young for Korea, we were too old for Vietnam, and we lived on the legacy of the greatest generation. Oh, yeah, that's interesting. Yeah, it's their lives were so... And it at the time, that greatest generation, you got to think about them. they came back from the Second World War. They all, they volunteered. They volunteered. They fought for the country. They came back. There was a sense of community and brotherhood there that extended itself when they come back and went to work into the workplace. So consequently, they were very strong Union people. You know why? Because when they were on the battlefield, they depended upon one another. They knew. We're kind of a lot of independent contractors now.
Yeah, well, that's to speak to all of society, and I feel like I always say this when we do the podcast, because why do people like podcasts so much? Because they're bringing people in terms of like breaking it down again. It's just this, they put the earbuds in, and it's very a connection, even though it's not human to human. Yeah. It breaks it all down to like just listening to another human being talk about their life, which brings people together. That's interesting. Okay, so you were 19 years old. First of all, your dad was in World War II? Yeah,
he was killed in the Second World War.
And we don't know the complete story. Or remember the guy, you went to go see the guy and he said...
Yeah, it was a little confusing about that. It was that was kind of a moving moment for me, that whole... the phenomenon of the person being the last person to see my father alive. Because you go through your whole life and your father gives his life for the country, and you just, in your mind's eye, the man's a hero. I mean, he's just a hero. And the story that he came back with was hard for me to take. I mean, the fact that what the story was is that...
Well, let's explain. You went to meet the guy who was the last guy.
Well, he actually called me. My cousin Jackie had found him. That there was a reunion of the survivors of the USS Bechuana.
That's the boat
the tanker that my father was on. So we contacted him, and he called me one night at his Rodwell, I think his name was Bill Rodwell. He called me one night at 10:30. I woke up and he told me the story about him meeting my father on the deck of the ship, and he was younger. My father was old. My father was in his 30s. And he said, and he called him John. He said, I told John that we have to get off the ship.
Was that his name?
That was my father's name.
Okay.
Nobody referred to him as John. He was either Scotty or Jack or Jackie. So I found that a little bit peculiar. And this fella told me he was on the swim team in high school, and he told my father that he should jump overboard with him, and he'd help me. My father said he couldn't swim, and he ran back into the galley and closed the door, and he went down with the ship. That was kind of a like turned my life inside out, because I had, as I said, in my mind's eye, I would tell people that, as my mother told me, and the family said, he was training people, and he got killed. So it was hard for me to reconcile that. But it is what it is, and who knows what it is.
Well, it's interesting, because as you were telling me that, I was thinking, okay, so there comes a time in your life when you're an adult and you see your dad for who they really are, which hopefully you do. Yeah. Hopefully you get over your whole, let's make them omnipotent. And so when you were just telling me that story about, I was like, well, if he couldn't swim, then there was really nothing he could do. He was hoping, his hope, when you just told me that, I would think, he was hoping maybe something better will happen, because if I jump, I'm going to die.
Well, that's right, but it's... I think that's human nature. I think that's an explanation, but I didn't get into that so much as that it was 50 years thinking one way, and then all of a sudden it gets flipped around. Right. It just, and it was peculiar, because that summer there was a reunion down in Rhode Island of survivors, and we went down there. My cousins, four of my cousins and myself, and kind of told them we were coming. Well, and I wanted to meet the fella, but he never showed up. He was there, but he never came to the place where they were having a reunion, and it was just very awkward, And there was one of the Sons of Survivor wrote a book, and and that captions in the book, about how the encounter of the Bill Rodwell and my father. So.
Oh, it is. Do you have the book?
Yeah, I think I still have it. Yeah.
Yeah, that's interesting because you're seeing it through the. For so many years, you believe this story, as opposed to I'm sure people listening will think, "Oh my gosh, what he's still a hero! Oh my god!" And
well, it's a different life. I was 3 years old when he was killed, so I had my memory of my father. I don't have any memory of my father.
And I have to tell you, we had lunch at the MoMA last spring or something when you were in New York, and we were eating lunch, and you said it very nonchalantly. You said to me something about you weren't sure what to do because you didn't have a father growing up, and it was the first time in my life that I was like, oh. It finally hit me. I was like, oh yeah, he didn't have a father growing up.
Yeah, right.
So it was interesting. That's what brought me around to saying that eventually in your life you go,
yeah, right.
Instead of why isn't everything perfect? You finally go, oh yeah, right. Oh yeah, he didn't have a father, so he's been winging it kind of, and he's done.
Right.
Well,
there's pluses and minuses. Sometimes people have fathers and they say, oh my God, I'll never be like him, or emulate the father in the best way. So it's.
But it was more so the fact that I was able, like you said, you finally got the real story about your father. I was finally able to sit in my body and go, oh, right. I don't know what I used to think, but that was the first time that I was like, oh, right, he didn't have a father.
You didn't think about anybody.
No, I know, but I'm glad I was able to get to the point before I'm dead that I was able to see just the truth and see you as a human being, which is why I wanted to do the podcast, which is why, so I want to go back. So you were 19 years old, because you guys got married and had kids when you were really young too, which is different today.
I was 22 and Mom was 20.
Okay, so you became an apprentice at 19.
Right.
You loved the union, you loved the separation of, because I believe that you're brilliant and that you haven't been always... Your smarts haven't been a completely
Somebody might question.
Well, I do. I think you're really smart, and I think that your smarts haven't always been completely exposed. Yeah. So we're going to expose them today. Kadoozie Kast, no pressure. No pressure, Dad, but come on. No. So, okay, so you're 19 years old, you become the apprentice. How many years do you have to be an apprentice? So you meet Mom. You knew Mom? You lived
yeah. I was dating Mom... we dated 5 years before we got married.
Oh, so you were dating her when you were an apprentice?
Oh, yeah.
Did you have the idea in your head that you were going to get married?
Oh, I had the idea in my head there would be nobody else in my life.
Really?
Oh.
Oh, I want to hear that.
Oh, without a doubt.
She must have been very pretty when she was
younger. She was a knockout.
She was, because she's still pretty, and she has pretty kids.
With Sully, we met one of Sully's friends.
Sully's your best friend.
My best friend.
My godfather.
Right. And he was telling her that I came over from Savin Hill and took the most beautiful girl in Savin Hill. I proceeded to tell her that the competition wasn't really that hard. When they would sit girls on the water fountain or bury them down the beach, it wasn't hard to be more charming than that.
I call that the Boston flirt. That's hilarious. Yeah. So they would kind of rough them up to flirt with them. Oh my goch! So they would bury them in the sand or sit them on the water fountain. Right. Oh my gosh! Yes, everybody.
And that was prior to high fives. But if it was in the high five era, they would give one another high fives.
Oh, they would.
Yeah, but they didn't. I mean, it was before the high five era.
So all right. So somebody just told me. I think it was Auntie Susan just told me the story recently that. So you weren't from Savin Hill. You grew up
in Jamaica Plain.
And you had the T-shirts and the duck's ass. How do you call it? What's the hair?
DA.
The DA.
Yeah.
And you looked like James Dean. That's the way you dressed, right?
Yeah.
And everybody in Savin Hill didn't. So Jamaica Plain is another neighborhood in Boston, in the inner city Irish Catholic Boston area. Right. Okay, so you come over because Auntie Susan was telling me that you came over and you came to pick Mom up or something, and she thought you were so cool.
I was picking Sally up down.
Oh, Sally, right.
Yeah, I was picking my cousin Sally up down. She was playing with your mother's sister, so I come down to pick her up.
Oh, and then Auntie said that Mom saw you and liked you, right?
Well, no, she was going with somebody else.
Mom was a
hot
commodity.
Yeah. Oh, she absolutely was. It evolved over years. It's neighborhood flirtation and puppy love, and it just grew.
And so then you dated for 5 years.
Yeah.
Now are you a full-on journeyman now at this point?
No, I was still an apprentice. You asked me how long it was. At that time, you had to work so many hours in the year, and I broke my arm. I lost some time on that, and I had other injuries.
How'd you break your arm? Come on, we want to hear the story.
We had gone bowling, and your mother and myself were coming home, and there was a cat up in the tree on the corner of Denny and Savin Hill Ave. Mm-hmm. So I of course wanted to impress your mother to get the cat down, so I started climbing up the tree, and I got up to the tree on the branch where the cat was, and the branch broke. Oh. So me and the cat come down. The cat went running away unscarred, and I broke my arm.
And now you have to tell me, because Mom's Irish Catholic. She shows you her love from a distance sometimes. Did she run over to save you, or did she say, Jimmy, get up? You don't remember.
Oh yeah. No, she definitely didn't run over to save me.
Come on, you're all right.
She said, are you all right?
Yeah.
And I said, my arm is sore.
Oh, no. Yeah. So now you're out of work, you're not an apprentice for how... That takes a while for your arm to
get better. Probably 6 weeks or 8 weeks I was out of work.
But that speaks to who you are. Instead of putting the girls on the water fountain and burying them, you're trying to save the cat.
Well, I mean...
Which is probably why you landed Mom.
Well, you got to remember, Susan, I had a head start on most people because it was only myself and Grandma. Mm-hmm. I had no brothers and no sisters. And my mother taught me from the day I can remember anything was to respect women. You hold the door, tip your hat, step aside, stand up when a woman comes in the room. So that was kind of inbred. And as I told you before, Grandma had the zone where you can't penetrate that zone. Everybody has his own. And Grandma's zone was pretty out there. And if I got in too close to Grandma, we got a whack on the back of the head.
Oh, yeah?
Oh.
You mean emotionally or physically?
Oh, no, physically.
Oh, right.
She was not a shrinking violet with that. So consequently, it's just by nature, I give women more room than most people do.
Well, you know what you taught me that I always remember? You taught me a lot of things that I remember, but one thing is when it's dark at night and you see somebody, especially a woman walking, tread softly or say something so that you don't scare them.
Right.
That was just a little thing that you taught me that I always thought, oh, that was nice.
Yeah.
Okay, so, and I just hit me now, so not only did you not have a dad, you were an only child. So the fact that you can function with other human beings is pretty miraculous.
Well, it's, yeah.
How the heck did you know you didn't have any?
Well, what you do is, I tell people all the time, you grew up lonely, and when you make friends, you don't have any brothers or sisters. The friends, it's genuine. You gotta be. I had to be friendly to people because I didn't have anybody to go home to talk things out. And I've told people all the time, I have one best friend.
That's Sully.
Been
your friend since how old? Since you were teenagers.
Teenagers,
That's
right.
Awesome. Okay. And you're 71 now.
Then I have my dear friends. That's an inner circle. Mm-hmm. Then I have my good friends. Then I have my friends. And then I have my acquaintances. Then I have people I know.
That's good.
So and they all have different degrees. I have different degrees of love for all of them.
And you let them in a little further than Grandma used to let people in.
Oh, yeah. Oh, yeah.
It passes a generation. All right, so you're apprentice for 5 years, and how do you get in the union? Are you in the union once they do the interview?
Yeah, once they go, you get sworn in, you're in the interview, you start paying your dues.
You pay your dues, and okay, so this is interesting. So you're young, you're paying your dues. How do they figure out the dues? Is it based on how much you make, or...
No, it was at the time. I don't know. At the time, no, it was I don't know. It was $1.50 a month. Everybody paid that. At the time I started, the first year apprentice hourly rate was $1.15 an hour. After 6 months, she went up to $1.97. I thought I was rich. The journeyman carpenter at the time was making $3.65 an hour.
That's crazy.
But that was a high standard of living.
And for the cost of living, how much the mortgage was?
Right.
Because you bought your house in Savin Hill for how much?
We bought our first house in Codman Square for $13,900.
So comparatively speaking,
yeah. And Savin Hill we bought for $23,000.
And Codman Square was a single family or
two family?
Two family.
Yeah.
Okay. And so did you always have renters?
Yes.
Oh, that's smart. How'd you know how to do that?
Well, that's the way it was. You wouldn't buy a single family house because you always needed help to pay the rent, pay the mortgage. You get the rent subsidized.
Mortgage, yeah. Okay, so you're in the union, you're paying your dues, and now I want you to explain to the bricklayers. So it's different when you go on a job. You're going to build a building. Everybody's a different union too, right?
Right.
So there's carpenters union, there's bricklayers union, there's
iron workers, electricians, plumbers, sheet metal workers, painters, roofers.
So everybody that does a different thing has a union,
right?
When you're putting together a building. And how did that come about? Do you know when the union started? Do you know what made?
Well, the Carpenters Union began in 1875, if I'm not mistaken. But it all evolved around the Industrial Revolution. Really, was the beginning of the labor movement in this country.
And did that all happen with the cars and everything too? Or?
Yeah. Well, yeah. When people moved from the farms into the urban area, we had a great influx of immigrants come into this country. It was based upon the industrialization, railroads, starting railroads and manufacturing and automobiles and
I think I remember reading that it was so that they could pay attention so they didn't get taken advantage of by the owners of the companies or whatever, right?
We're a capitalistic system of a nation. I mean, we're driven by big business, and that, and it was a result of people believing they were being unfairly treated.
And were they, or you don't know?
Oh well, yeah, there was working hours of work were it was 6 days a week, 10, 12 hours a day, and it was very hard. For a family, for a person to be in the family, with meager wages, and it evolved along, and and what happened at that time, it started getting. It was very difficult. I mean, it was very. If you can think about a cultural change, whoever heard of workers having a right to say in building something, they should be thankful they got a job and we're paying them. So it evolved. It was very difficult. A lot of pain, a lot of suffering, a lot of debts.
There were, right? It was really violent.
Yeah. It was very, very difficult.
And so, what did the dues do? What does the dues go to?
Well, the dues went to pay for the salary of the business agent. The business agent full-time union representative. People that would negotiate contracts, process grievances.
Okay, so I'm going to hire you for a job to come build my building. I got to go through the business agent first to talk about what contract we're going to have and how much everybody's going to get paid. Is that how it works?
There's a what people refer to the massive collective bargaining agreement. When I came into the union, it was the Boston District Council. There was 7 local unions in there, and that agreement covered all the locals in the Carpenters local.
And who initially negotiated that?
All the business agents from the 4 Carpenter local unions, and then you had a floor layers local union, pile drivers local union, millwrights local union. There were specialty trades within the Carpenters Union, and they negotiate their own contract. Now there's the New England Regional Council of Carpenters, and with various there's Maine, New Hampshire, and Vermont. Then there's Massachusetts, Rhode Island, and Connecticut. So there's various. I'm not sure how many collective bargaining agreements, but it's administrated by one union, New England Regional Council of Carpenters.
Okay, all of them. All the different collective bargaining agreements are watched over by the one.
Right.
And now when you pay the dues, did you pay into the pension too? Is that part of the pension or no?
The pension fund in the Carpenters Union began in 1962. and it started with 25 cents an hour.
You had to give 25%.
Well, what happened? Yeah, it was negotiated. It was negotiated with the contractors. For example, the contractors would say, "We can give you 75 cents a year for 3-year race. You can do what you want." And the Health and Welfare Fund was established. They established the pension fund in 1962. They decided to put 25 cents an hour in health and welfare, 25 cents an hour into the pension fund, and 25 cents an hour into the pay.
So you're making $1.67 or something, and you're putting 75 cents of that into the pension, into the health welfare too?
It's not. No. This is above that.
Okay.
You have the $1.15 an hour plus your contribution into the health and welfare plus your contribution into the.
So they were paying you to put into the pension, is how it starts.
The pension and health and welfare fund, the health plan, they're trust funds, so they're administered by a board of trustees, and you don't see that money. The employer automatically gives that money into each fund.
Oh, so it's the emphasis is on the employer to pay it.
Right.
That's cool.
Yeah.
So then you got the people protected, so at least they had health care and they had retirement pension.
Right.
Okay. So that was just part of the deal. Everybody knew it was part of the deal.
That's right.
That's how it all got set up.
That's right.
Okay, sounds fair to me.
Yeah.
Okay. So this is.
It does sound fair.
But I'm trying to get to, you know what I mean? I'm trying to figure out what's going on and why it went awry, which you told me you can explain somewhat to me. Okay, so you were a carpenter for how many years?
How many years? I was at the trade for 18 years.
So
I was a carpenter. I was working with the tools for 14 years, and 4 years as general agent.
Okay, when did you stop being a apprentice after 5 years?
5 years.
And you become what, a journeyman?
Journeyman, right.
Okay, and then you were what? What was the next thing that you were?
Well, I was a foreman. I ran a couple of jobs.
And then you were an agent, you said?
Then I was a general agent in the carpentry.
What's a general agent?
Well, he was the chief elected officer of the 7 local unions in the Boston District Council.
So you negotiated the contracts?
Negotiated contracts, yep.
All right, so you went from being a 19-year-old cat-saving, broken-arm guy to, by the time you're 37?
33 I was elected.
You were elected to be the agent.
Right.
And then you owed that for how many years?
4 years.
Okay, so that brings us to 37.
Right.
Now, do you run for the Secretary Treasurer of the Carpenters Union? Is that when that happened?
No, I was elected when I was 33. Then I ran once re-election.
Wait a minute, is the agent the same thing as the Secretary Treasurer?
Right.
Okay.
The General Agent Secretary Treasurer.
Oh,
big long title. Didn't mean much, but it was a big.
But you wore the suit.
Yeah.
And you had the hair, and you had the whole parted down the middle,
right?
With the vests. I remember. And your office was in Brighton,
right?
Okay, so you ran the first time you were elected when you were 33,
right?
Second, what was it called? The whole title?
Secretary Treasurer General Agent of the Carpenters District Council of Boston. That's tough to get on the business card.
That's a big. I told you were brilliant. Okay, so you ran for how many years? Did you hold that?
4 years.
And then you rerun, and I remember that, right? That was the rerun.
Yeah, and I lost.
But can we tell what went on? It doesn't matter now, right? Wasn't there some shady stuff that?
No. Well, no different than any other union election.
There was some stuff into the ballots or anything.
There was. I mean, no. There was intimidation. There was, the rules of the game were changed. I lost by 39 votes. When I first ran, each local union had an election on a different day. So that allowed me to be at every polling place and have all my supporters at poll. Well, my political opponents got wise to that. They said, we'll limit his ability to get to the poll. We'll have the election at all the local unions on the same day.
Oh. Yeah, so part of the showing up and being there with the people was a big help.
Oh, no, it really was. Yeah.
And I remember when you cried.
No, I did.
I think you did.
No way.
Come on.
No way.
Are you sure?
Absolutely. Your mother was more angry than me.
So you were angry, you didn't cry? Because I just
No.
remember feeling sad.
No, I absolutely
Did I cry? Maybe I cried.
No.
No, you didn't. See, this is
Absolutely.
good. We're clearing up the memories.
No, no way. And what I believe in is you take what's given to you and look at it in a way. Why did it happen? Don't wring your knuckles. Your hands with white knuckles and figure out this one's to blame, that one's to blame. Move on. Get on with your life. Figure out what else you're going to do.
Now, maybe Mom was nervous.
Oh, she.
Because I just remember being nervous.
Well, yeah. Well, no, I don't. That's different.
Okay,
Was I nervous? Yeah, I was nervous.
Because you didn't have a job.
Right.
Yeah, and you had to
Right.
figure out. And you went back to being a carpenter, right?
Right.
Oof. So you went back to being a carpenter after being it's a big job. It was a big shot job.
Yeah.
So you did what you
I
had to
thought
do.
so.
I remember. And so you did what you had to do, and you went back to being a carpenter. So, okay, so now at this point you're still paying into the pension and paying your dues the whole time. No.
No.
'Cause
That was it was a hiatus. I did side jobs, odd jobs during that 6-month period.
After you
Yeah.
lost the election?
Right.
So you weren't in the union, but does it still stay
Oh,
all
yeah.
the stuff you paid into earlier?
Yeah.
And does it accumulate? So say you stopped at 37, would you get more?
Yeah. Well, that's pretty much what happened. I ended up with in my pension. I ended up with 18 years of credible service.
Because 37 was the end of.
Right. The contribution into.
But you
the
don't
pension.
get your pension until you're 65,
Right.
and it grows or it doesn't.
No. What they do is they give you the pension fund is structured in such a way that every full year of credit you get a certain amount of money for each year. When the pension fund was established in 1962, the board of trustees took out a mortgage, just like a house. And the reason they took the mortgage out is they wanted to give some of the older fellas that were going to retire a small pension, but they didn't contribute enough to get one. So they had to get the money from somewhere. So the first, I think, 11 years, the contributions went in to pay off that mortgage.
And was there any resistance to that, or was there any say?
No.
Everybody wanted to take care of everybody.
That was the whole idea. Was was to give somebody the dignity of a retirement after working entire life at a trade.
So we're still kind of in the mindset at this point of the guys who went to war, who came back, who established it. So we're still at this point. You're 37 years old.
Yeah.
It's 19. What year is that?
79.
1979. Okay, so you go for 6 months and you do odd jobs.
Yeah.
You have how many kids? All of us? Did you have all of us?
All of you.
You had 4 kids at this point. And so you're trying to figure out what you're going to do to pay the mortgage, to take to feed us, everything.
Right.
Okay, so then after 6 months, what happens?
Well, during my term in office, I had worked on a statewide referendum on what they call tax classification, where municipalities could tax business at a different rate than residents. And I had made friends with firefighters and police officers. And they had, 1977, they had started this committee under Professor Dunlop, the Joint Labor Management Committee.
And Professor Dunlop was a professor at Harvard.
He was a professor at Harvard.
A brilliant man.
Former Secretary of Labor. Yeah. He was a dean of arts and sciences over there in the early 70s. So he was, and it was, the committee was an agency of the state that would settle collective bargaining disputes between firefighters, police officers, and the municipalities. And they had a senior staff labor person position, a senior staff management person. And my friend Paul Quirk had the job, and he got elected secretary-treasurer of the AFL-CIO, the state organization, so the position opened up. And the president of the state firefighters, a dear friend of mine, God rest his soul, Dusty Allwood, asked me if I'd be interested in taking it, because he thought a tradesman would be able to relate to firefighters and police officers in a way that somebody else couldn't. Couldn't have a firefighter, really couldn't have a police officer in the position. because it would be that
too close to home.
Right,
Yeah.
right.
So you were a mediator. You would go in and mediate which means you would like try to play like be like Sweden.
Right.
Try to be like. Okay, so come on, Dad. You were 19 years old. You grew up with no father, no siblings, and you went from being a carpenter to working with a professor from Harvard.
Right. Oh yeah, I fooled a lot of people.
Stop! You didn't fool a lot of people. It's cool. All right, so you're on the Joint Labor Management Committee,
right?
And you would so if the firemen. So okay, let's talk about what happened with the firemen in Boston just a couple of years ago. Now I came up. I get always into because I always call you. Remember when the UPS they went on strike, and I would call you every day from New York because I was fascinated. And one day you told me, "Oh, they just lost all their leverage." They did one thing, and it lost all. They had all the leverage, and then they did one thing, and then the scab, because the scabs would come on. The scabs are people that aren't union that would cross the picket line, which when we were growing up was a no-go.
Right.
Because Paul Quirk, what year did we go down to Washington? And that we went in a RV and we went and picketed on Washington, right? I
think 1978.
Oh, so the year before you stopped.
The election, right?
Okay, so the year before which election?
The final election.
The year before the final election, we were down. He literally would make us go down and picket with him, just so you know, everybody. Me and Jimmy and Paul and his kids, right? Yeah. We went down. So what were we picketing down there? Do you remember?
It was at the time there was a rally for labor law reform. There was many labor law hadn't been reformed in many years, and the AFL-CIO wanted a demonstration, so they called a National Day of protest.
And you were like, "Come on, kids, we're going." All right, so then we go down. So then now you're okay. So because now I want to, before we have a few more minutes left in the podcast, and I want to get to. So the firefighters, they were having a problem. They had reached an agreement, right, in Boston. The firefighters had reached the agreement, and then you explain it to me because I'm not sure what went on.
Well, it's a few minutes long.
It's not a few minutes. We have like.
It was there was 2 deaths of 2 firefighters in a fire in West Roxbury.
Right.
And there was reports that came back that substance were found in their bodies. And the city took a very strident position that they were going to require firefighters to be subject to random drug and alcohol testing. And they wanted to make it part of the collective bargaining agreement. So...
And it was time for them to renegotiate anyways, right? It wasn't like they were forcing it.
Yeah, the contract had expired or was about to expire. It was so there was a lot of pushing and shoving, and it became a very acrimonious time for negotiation between the Firefighters Local 718 and the city.
And you were retired at this point, so
I was still active, but there was an incredible amount of newspaper reaction to it, and a lot of people. And collective bargaining is kind of an art. It's like a mating dance that there are a lot of discussions that go on in the semi-public eye that are difficult to really analyze. But the real nuts and bolts is the informal, off-the-record discussions. And many times you end up with an understanding through that informal discussion between the principals involved in collective bargaining, the president of the union and the mayor, or the president of the union and the town manager or city manager. There's an understanding. But there was very little private discussions going on in that dispute.
So you mean they were using the press to negotiate
there was
the whole thing?
everything was out. Everything was out in the press. One side would make an accusation. The other side would make an accusation, and the process became difficult because in mediation, if the parties want to fight and they want to call one another names, very little that can be accomplished in mediation. If in fact there's no one with the resolve to find the settlement to dispute, and I learned in the business that's a key word.
Settlement?
Find a settlement. It's unfortunately most people look at collective bargaining as win or lose.
Right.
And the truth of the matter is it's settlement. Mm-hmm. It's not winner or loser, it's settlement. So it was long, drawn out, very painful for everybody involved in it. Good people got whacked around.
There's a lot of emotions because people think that some people think that the firefighters don't work enough and they're getting away with it because of the unions. It's a very volatile, emotional.
It's hard. It's if you put it in the context of what they do, and most part, in people have I think a bad view of it because when that alarm rings and they got to get moving. A lot of stress on that job. They don't know what they're going out. They go out to the station. They may get a cat out of a tree. They may go out to the station and go into a fire with a family trapped on the third floor, and they got to figure a way how to get that family out.
And sometimes they die.
Yeah.
And they see gruesome stuff. I know. I don't understand it.
And you look at it. Unfortunately, people take it, whether it's fire or it's police officers, they look at the downtime, but the downtime isn't really downtime. They're there to serve and protect. Sometimes by the mere presence or the mere responding, they end up preventing things from happening. So it's I don't know if it's jealousy or what, but I don't think fire or police get enough credit.
I don't either, and I think it speaks to what we first started talking about, how fast our society is now. Yeah. There's not a lot of humanity to it, like seeing people as human beings. Like, even over the years of them seeing so much trauma, what that does to a human being.
Yeah. Yeah.
I mean, and if you put the alcohol or whatever involved, like, okay, yeah, it's not great. You don't want firefighters to be drunk, but there has to be more to it than just anger.
Well, but the emotions get away from people sometimes. And I'm myself. I'll tell you right now, when I started in the business, I loved people saying that Jim Costello is a very aggressive guy.
You used to swear when you did the picket lines. Tell me the truth, because you never swore in front of me, and you would always tell us not to swear. But Jimmy would tell me when he went out with you that you would sometimes swear on the picket line.
Oh, yeah.
So only in front of the boys. Jimmy would come home and tell me, and I'd be like, what? He swore? Oh, my gosh.
Yeah, well, it's all part of the drama. Mm-hmm. It's you do it. It's not something I would brag about. It's but it's kind of what the game's all about.
Mm-hmm. And you can't just not match. No. Like we were talking about today. You can't just match complete aggression with like total. Yeah. Sometimes you have to match it a little bit or do it. You can't just pretend like it's not happening.
Well, as I told you, I like to be, when I started my career, I like to be known as Jim Costello, the aggressive guy. As time went on, bumps and bruises came. I like that. That guy over there, he's a pretty thoughtful guy.
Yes.
I don't care if they know my name.
Because aggression can get you. Sometimes right. I find like whenever I acted aggression, it was kind of dumb because I would screw it up instead of...
Great lessons to be learned, though.
Yes. All right, and before, I want to just finish a little bit. I know it's very complicated, and maybe we'll have to come back and do another Kadoozie Kast with you. But when we were talking about the hostess, I know it's very complicated, but the idea, the general overview of what's going on with the pensions now compared to what used to happen is part of it is how fast the cost of living, how people, the humanity that's missing and everything. But did you tell me that there was something to everybody's getting older at the same time? Oh, you said there were a lot of collective bargainings that were confusing it all because the hostess was going out of business and they were saying that the pensions were causing the businesses to go, the unions and their pensions were causing the businesses to go out of business.
let me look at my notes for a minute. I did.
Oh, good. Because I want to know where it's all going, and just a general overview. We can do this again and talk about the specifics of it all, but
they had 19,000 workers.
Mm-hmm.
83% of them were union.
Mm-hmm.
They had 36 plants, 500 distributing centers, 372 collective bargaining agreements for less than 19,000 people.
300 and how many?
72. They had 40 multi-employer pension plans. 40 So it was a cornucopia of distress. It was very, very difficult, and the owners of the company were hedge funds, Silver Point Capital, and Monarch Alternative Capital, and a private equity firm, Ripwood Holding.
So we're talking about just actual hedge funds, not actual people running the business.
Right.
So it's a bunch of big business, so it's falling apart all along the way.
That's the financing of it. And those people have a responsibility to the shareholders that are in there. They got to push around. So it's very, very... And the funny thing about it, since that they went in bankruptcy, there's a ton of people looking to buy the business. So that tells me the product, they had a good product.
Mm-hmm.
They just had a problem delivering the product.
So it wasn't the pensions and the unions that caused it to fall apart.
The pension, in 2005, the pension was, they had $450 million unfunded liability. 2005. When they went into bankruptcy, they had, I think, a $1.5 billion unfunded liability. What that meant is that the employers didn't put the money into the pension fund.
Oh, and they kept pushing it off and pushing it off.
And it built,
gambling. That makes sense because it was equity funds.
Well, but by the same token, you got to... There's kind of no good guys and bad guys in this one, because the private equity firms and the hedge funds had a responsibility to shareholders.
Right.
They had to deliver the product. In delivering the product, they had to pay the workers.
Mm-hmm.
So the shareholders had to make money, the workers had to get paid.
So they were trying to balance it and balance it and balance
so
it.
So they said, well, we'll deal with this later. That's a formula for disaster.
And the people don't have any pensions now that left that job. No.
I don't know what kind of pensions they have. They're bankruptcy. They're in line with all the creditors.
Yeah.
They're standing in line. We're in.
But it's amazing because we started off this whole conversation talking about how back in the day it was more pure, and now brings us right full circle to an actual company that is suffering because of what we were talking about the greed and going too fast and people not paying attention and overextending themselves.
I think that may be a little bit too critical, calling it greed. What it is, I agree with you that it moves fast, and what happens is that we have a tendency to coin a phrase, to kick the can down the road a little bit. Mm-hmm. We'll deal with this problem tomorrow. But it's more complicated than criticizing kicking it, because they have the entity that's going. They got to keep the people working. You say to yourself, well, if we fund that, then we have to reduce the force by 25%. Well, we can't deliver the product if we do reduce. We can't make it. We can't deliver it. So all of those things come into play. It's and just the fact that you got 372 collective bargaining agreements and 40 pension funds. I don't know how you do it.
Right. So it wasn't necessarily the pensions and the unions. It was the structure of how it all.
That's right. There was structural problems. Absolutely.
Because I feel like everybody's so quick to say, like, oh, it's the unions. Okay, so as we close, I know this is like very simple, but I want to know the pluses and the minuses to what's going on with the unions, having unions today, because I know Michigan, they're trying to get rid of unions, right? They don't want to have unions at all.
Well, let me respond to that. If you listen to public comments, and I listen to public comments a lot, in the public comments you would find that I believe, very disrespectful. You've got people that are elected to office, and they're seldom referred to as elected officials. They're generally referred to as politicians, which is not the most complimentary way you can address somebody. And union seems to be the other element in public discussions that are being held responsible for the perception that things aren't going right is because of unions. But there's a whole layer in between the elected officials and people that are covered by collective bargaining, and it's the managers. You don't get elements in a collective bargaining agreement by walking in and taking it. You negotiate with the employer, and the employer have representatives. They have managers, and then the managers manage. The laws in this country, this is a capitalistic system, the laws in this country, the national laws and most state laws are heavily favored in front for the employer. So consequently, if you have law in a capitalistic system that favors the employer, and the employer hires managers, and the managers can't manage, you ought not to be blaming the workers for the dilemmas you're in, because you're the one who negotiated.
And on that, it's going to bring us full circle to, I'm going to have to go back and listen to this again, and then I want to have another Kadoozie Kast with you, because you are brilliant, Dad. And I think people need to understand this. It's important.
It really is. It really is. And it's, I don't want to say organized labor has had a significant impact in our standard of living.
Good or bad?
Positive, right. Absolutely positive. It's there aren't many people in the labor movement that would agree with me, but I think we in the labor movement in general rely too heavily on the political system to deliver goods, when in fact the product is what we take to the workplace day in and day out, not laws. It's the dignity of a worker that's really important.
Well, that's what I want to close with. That's what I was thinking. But that's what every podcast comes to, is the idea of like bringing it back to a little bit of humanity. It's not as easy to fix, but at least if you bring it back to humanity in some way. And that's why I figured if we talked about it with you, people would get a better understanding instead of just react and like have this horrible reaction to don't even know what you're talking about, an uneducated anger or whatever it is that seems to be thriving in this country. All right, well, Dad, thank you very much for doing it.
You're welcome. My pleasure. That was fun.
All right, everybody, me and my dad are signing out.